Okay, well, why did I choose this and start? Partly, I think, because I think there's a lot more hope around what's happening with Labour generally now than perhaps we've had in the last 10 years or so. And therefore, was that likely to wash into the tech sector? And so a bit like you, I've done some sort of research into what's been said. Had a look. I mean, Peter Kyle, who's the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology in the new government, has been sort of quite vocal about what they want to do. And I think if you tie together what he says, along with particularly Rachel Reeves, who's the Chancellor, this idea that they need to use technology to drive us forward as a country, I think is a sort of underpinning. But clearly there's another side too, which is this whole sort of regulation and control. I mean, one of the things that you tend to get with the Labour government rather than the Conservative government is more focus on regulation and control and central control. On this occasion, it might work to advantage. I mean, there's the whole issue of AI regulation. I think that's going to have quite an impact. There's been a lot of talk about how difficult it could become if the EU gets too sort of restrictive in terms of AI regulation. And yet we see a Labour government that is probably going to build closer and closer ties with the EU to sort of almost harmonise things more with the EU. So it may well be that there'll be some battles to be fought, certainly with the big tech companies around AI regulation. But I think there's certainly a good focus on it. But from my perspective, I think they've said all the right words in terms of improving the economy, reducing red tape for small and medium-sized enterprises trying to deal with government IT contracts. I think this idea of a national data library in the public sector, is an interesting one to pull things together. Will it work? The government's not got all governments have got a poor record of having these sort of big sort of ideas and getting them to work from a technology viewpoint. It's interesting as well. I think if you look at what they're talking about, that they may well decide to keep some Tory era approaches. I was going to say regulation, but certainly around funding and sort of innovation and funding. The Tories were starting to put stuff in place, albeit rather slowly, that was going to help in terms of driving sort of tech investment forward. I get the idea that Labour's quite a pragmatic government, not an ideological government, and it will take a number of pragmatic approaches to that. So they will try and make it easier to get funding, I think, in terms of that. But getting rid of red tape, I think, will be a huge help. And one area that interests me, because it's sort of popped up recently, again, as part of this, is this whole issue of we talked about how we need more data centers because of AI and all those sort of things. It is making it easier, and they've specifically talked about data centers getting approval for data center building. Microsoft want to invest more data centers in the UK, but clearly the issue has been planning. And I mean, Labour's talked about improving planning regulations right across the piece, but they've specifically stated that they want to make it easier for data center providers to get planning permission for new data centers, probably away from the main areas like the Docklands and Slough and places like that, where they've become oversubscribed, if you like, with that. But going into
data center hubs,
but actually, I think issues of latency are not quite such big issues as they were, certainly because a lot of the real latency critical infrastructure has already been put in place for the banks and places like that. So they can go slightly outside the sort of main hubs to where there is power. I mean, that's the other one. If you think about some of the old industrial areas that have massive power capability. I mean, blast furnaces take huge amounts of power. If they're closing those down, the grid there is ready for them. So I think there's areas. How do you move that along at pace? And I think the government's very, focused on trying to do that for various reasons that are both sort of political as well as economic. But I think just in summary, if you sort of weigh it up, they want to make it easier to do business, but at the same time, and this is going to be the conundrum, they want to make sure that things like AI are regulated properly. So it's getting that balance right. We shall see. I mean, the King's speech is on Wednesday. They'll have to lay out their short-term plans for the next Parliament, and it'll be interesting to see what, if anything, comes out of that. But I do see somewhere that says, an organisation, a government that's going and saying, I understand that technology is now critical to the way in which we grow our economy. And if Rachel Reeves is saying that, we have to grow our way out of this problem we're in, the only way, technology is going to be a lot of how that plays out. So I think anything that they do, they've got to address issues like, visas for people with the right qualifications. There's a shortage of the right level of people, and so they've got to get over some of the issues that are going to appear around how do I bring people in the short term who've got the technology skills we need without driving us into a different debate around immigration.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, I agree. I think that's going to be tricky. So just a couple of clarifications for the audience. So Paul mentioned Tory, which is essentially the Conservative party, is another political party in the UK. He mentioned a couple of locations, Slough and Docklands. Again, these are just locations around the London area for the international.
I mean, it's interesting.
Audience.
Yeah, the reason why they're there. I mean, if you're in America, then the whole sort of Ashburn, Virginia. It's that sort of thing. The interconnections are all there. The pop-up of the Atlantic pipeline comes up in Slough. The European Internet Exchange pops up in Docklands. That's where all the interconnects are. That's why it went there. That's where the market's moving away from, or not moving away. It's fairly well sorted for interconnect. But actually, AI and others require huge amounts of power, and that's where it's going to drive new investment. But yeah, you're right. That's why Slough, and that's why Docklands.
So I think I picked up on similar things. I looked at the Labour manifesto, which was published on the 13th of June of this year. So they set out the first 6 steps for change, but there wasn't anything IT specifically or technology specifically in those, although somebody said, well, it's probably across all 6 of those if you really think about it. And I think all the announcements that were made recently were made by Rishi Sunak. I did actually post on this recently. Rishi Sunak is the previous Conservative Prime Minister, and he made an announcement which I actually had I did a short episode on it with Amanda Brock from OpenUK, and we discussed actually all the announcements. It seemed to be like that announcement seemed to be like a copy and paste of all the recent stuff that somebody had, a junior clerk or somebody had in the at number 10 of all the AI investments and things like that. So there was a ton of those from everybody from OpenAI to Anthropic to Google. Some AI startups were all promising to kind of have their HQ and invest in the UK in that. So I think kind of Labour was a little bit short on kind of doing those. The report I picked up on, well, there was a number of those, but there was one from the Centre for European Policy Analysis, the CEPA, back from the 12th of this month, actually, from July. And that one said, so it had first of all had a picture of the new Prime Minister, the Labour Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. I think it was at the MTC, the Manufacturing Technology Center, and they were amusingly looking at, or bewilderingly looking at, a Boston Dynamics dog, or those robot dogs that run around, which I thought was quite interesting. So yeah, so that was interesting. And the report itself said that apart from the political swipe at that, which said Labour, and I quote, Labour ran a campaign that was a referendum on Tory rule. So that was the quote from that particular report, and it said it was what else to say? Yeah, and Labour has been seen or has been really tight-lipped on kind of technology policy, but that's not surprising. I think there was a lot of kind of tight-lipped stuff in the run-up to the election, and then yeah, go on. Sorry,
it's always difficult, reading manifestos and listening to what goes on during an election process. It needs to be taken with a huge pinch of salt, because the realities of what they find when they get through the door, no money left, thank you very much, all those sort of issues mean that they've got some very different issues. But I think there's an intent there from Labour to really try to grow some of the new tech sectors. Rachel Reeves, who the Chancellor of the Exchequer, when she was in, as shadow Chancellor, i.e. in opposition, was spending the last few months heavily going around, technical sectors, financial sectors, meeting with people. Because I think the big thing that comes out of everything I've heard from sort of commentators and people in industry is that they need a period of predictability and certainty about what's going to happen, and therefore it's important in the first 6 months that they do some of the they seem to be doing to start some of the things they want to get going. Most of them will take years to come to fruition, but I think that's the intent I get, that a government that's prepared to step on some toes in things like planning for data centers, but also to try and get things moving as quickly as possible with a realistic approach, about what's going to happen in the future. So I think, I always take manifestos with a large dose of salt.
Yeah. Well, I'm just glad that the farm near our house is not big enough for a data center. So I think my area is quite safe. So not taking anything greatly seriously, or as you said, this CEPA report with a massive pinch of salt, considering it's European policy. So they do report on things like the digitization of government. So Labour wants to encourage the deployment of cutting-edge technology to improve efficiency, blah, blah, blah. Supporting AI industry and data centers, as you said. So Labour manifesto aims to, quote unquote, ensure our industrial strategy supports the development of the AI sector, and removes planning barriers to new data centers, as you said. But also at the same time, it's imposing, or will impose, strict AI regulation. So again, doing that as part of the sort of the process. Binding regulation, quotes again, binding regulation on the handful of companies developing the most powerful AI models. That's what the report says. So this is
against firing across a shot across the bows for Microsoft and Google in particular, I think, by the sound.
Yes. Well, yeah, and there has been some recent developments, but we'll leave that aside for now. But yeah, and then it says, unlike the light touch approach of the previous Conservative government, Labour could stifle the transformative technologies rollout. That's their conclusion. But again, I don't really put a lot of faith in the CEPA and what they say. Their language is extremely hostile in that report to the UK in general. What a surprise. Yeah, I mean, I think the only factual things is the digitization of the government, the planning permission for data centers, as you said, and the AI regulation. And that's probably all I can get from that. I do have some other reports. So there was one from the something called the EM360, Enterprise Management 360, that was published on the 8th of July. The title is How a Labour Government Will Change UK Tech. Again, quite similar in terms of shaking up the business community with policies promising increased investment and economic stability, managing and regulating development of AI. They actually seem to mention a lot of what Rishi Sunak had done last year, which was the AI Safety Summit back in October last year. Again, mentioned, actually they quoted the Labour manifesto, set out binding regulation for major AI firms to improve AI safety. So that's actually in the manifesto, apparently. And then they got some quotes from the industry. So the EMEA VP for PagerDuty.
Yeah.
What else was here? Let me just read the country manager for Snowflake as well. And yeah, I think they sort of have some concerns about sort of ripple effects being created and then binding regulation for AI safety being introduced. Those are the main points that those two mentioned. Public sector expected to hire chief AI officers, or KOs. I don't know how you'd pronounce the acronym for that. So chief AI officers in the public sector. Supports appropriate application of digital technology and provide environment for innovation to thrive. Sounds a little bit nebulous and academic, but there you go. That was part of that report as well. They mentioned the National Data Library to help data-driven public services. Now, I think to me that's a juicy target for hackers to have a go at, especially those in certain dodgy parts of the world. But we'll see how that happens and whether it's going to be delivered on time, which never happens in IT projects by the government, regardless of what the government is. Remove barriers for building data centers, again, quite similar. So Paul, expect a modular reactor data center being built around your house at some point. I think that would be quite cool.
I think what's driving most people to distraction is the number of new pylons that are going to be
yes,
across the country.
And those two, yes,
the offshore power grids, into the national grid. So
yes, expect a couple of data centers driven by SMRs in your area anytime soon. Okay, and then investment in digital technology for healthcare. So yeah, that's interesting. A quote from Amanda Brock from the OpenUK was in that report. So she's saying, update the outdated tech and public sector and fix our broken NHS. I agree with that. Labour must first look to the country's digital infrastructure. It is not too late for the UK to break free from the shackles of vendor lock-in, which has been allowed to infantilize our public sector. So this is that kind of whole, going back to that sort of Fujitsu and some of all these other players that have been, hanging around the public sector for decades and just sucking it dry with all these, delayed and non-working IT projects that they, kind of start and never really finish properly.
Yeah.
And then the final piece on that is securing the public sector against cybersecurity.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with a lot of the sort of sentiment. I mean, I have a level of sympathy for any tech vendor trying to deal with government procurement, public sector procurement at the moment, and the way in which they develop projects. So good luck to Labour trying to simplify that and make it easier. I think that is going to be a big challenge.
Yeah. Okay, and another report I had was Tech UK. That was back on the 17th of June. So that was titled Party Manifestos. They basically looked at all the parties' manifestos. What do they mean for the tech sector? Tech UK is quite a positive voice, I think, for tech in the UK. Yeah, I think they mentioned, they were the ones who mentioned, yeah, the tech sector's running through all 6 pledges of the Labour manifesto. More data centers, as you said, regulating AI and things like that. They were talking about the creation of a regulatory innovation office, or RIO for short.
I saw that.
Yeah.
It wasn't one I thought, I wasn't sure quite what that was going to do and how that was going. Yeah, this is a way of saying, how do we cut the red tape? Probably. It sounds like, but it gives it a lovely term, regulatory innovation.
Regulatory innovation office. Yeah. So I think, isn't that a contradiction in terms, regulatory innovation?
I think so. I think this is a classic, and for those of us who, of our generation, Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister was a wonderful satirical comedy BBC program that ran for many years that most people in government used to duck because they knew how accurate they were.
It was,
it's a classic one of saying, right, we just need another body now to deflect and deflect what's really going on.
So again, in the manifesto, the Labour manifesto says more data centers. So I guess the guys in the data center hall at Cloud Expo Europe will be very happy with that. So they can carry on for a few more years selling their stuff. Something called DSIT, Digital Center for Government. I don't know what DSIT stands for. DSIT. I don't know what it stands for. I think the report actually didn't say what it stood for. Maybe they didn't understand it either. Again, binding regulation on AI. So that's a repeat of what we heard before. Use of AI in the NHS. To speed up diagnostic services, but how long is that going to take to implement, and what kind of sovereignty can you guarantee around that, and data privacy and so on?
I think one of the things, again, it's a big interest area of mine for various reasons, but a lot of, I think, the AI focus will be on how to improve process. Right? Yes, you'll see some of these others, but there's such a lot of oversight and sort of regulation to get through in terms of new diagnostic procedures, new technologies, etc. I think the first area that you might see some real progress in AI is on improving the productivity within the NHS in non-medical areas.
So more the administrative side, right?
Yeah, but I mean, there's some simple things maybe we'll come back to. But if you've ever followed a guy called Rory Cellan-Jones, who was a BBC technology reporter for many years, the guy has actually been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and he's really does a wonderful set of blogs every week and a wonderful website that we ought to sort of focus on, where he really does do quite a lot around how is IT, how is technology starting to improve the patient experience. Very, very good. And a lot of it relates to the fact that it's not joined up, and you have to keep, all those sort of issues that we know about, and other people in other geographies may be saying, what the hell's going on? Well, they think the NHS is one organization. It's not. It's about 250 different organizations, and they don't talk to each other, all those sort of things. And so he's been really interesting to read into, because he has to interface to the NHS as a patient on a regular basis.
Yeah, of course.
And therefore his knowledge of technology, as well as his situation he's in, makes for fascinating reading and some hope for the future. Interesting.
Okay, so I have another one which is called UKTN, or UK Tech News, but I won't go into that. I'll just include the links to the descriptions, kind of more or less that's the same thing. Okay, so interesting topic. I think we've kind of picked on the main things there for that one. So we'll, I think, wait and see how things develop in the future for this one. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.